Hello and welcome to Endurance Minded. It's the podcast that aims to redefine what it means to reach our full potential by exploring how movement and mindset impacts our lives and how we can all work to show up as the best versions of ourselves. I'm your host, Taylor Thomas, founder at TEC, and before we get started, I've got an all call. If you're a coach or an entrepreneur in the health and fitness industry who's trying to grow your business without burning out, I want to personally invite you to apply for the Growth Circle. The Growth Circle is our business accelerator program at TEC, and it's designed specifically to serve providers like you in the health and fitness industry. People who are incredible at what they do, but they need a proven framework and real support to actually scale. Let's be real, running a coaching business can feel like a grind. You're juggling programming and client communication, marketing, admin work, and somehow you're still trying to grow your business. That's where the Growth Circle comes in. Inside the program, we help you nail down your ideal client and get really clear on what your offer is. We help you build a consistent lead gen process so you're not wondering where your next client comes from. We help you improve your sales skills without feeling salesy. And most importantly, create systems and support so that you're not doing it alone. You'll be a part of a driven community of other business owners in this space who get it. We host regular group calls, team intensives, mastermind sessions to make sure you're never stuck trying to figure it out in a silo. So if you're tired of winging it, if you're tired of trying to do it all by yourself, to recreate the wheel, figure out what levers to pull, what's broken and what's not, if you're ready to turn your passion into a business that actually works for you, I want to invite you to apply. You can find the link to the Growth Circle in our show notes. And I want you to really think about what's best for you and your business. I want you to think about how your business can really make an impact on the industry and how it can give you the life that you're excited about and make the money that you deserve, working with the clients that you love, spending time investing in the things that you care about and you're passionate about. So if this is a problem you're committed to solving and you want to take your business to the next level, again, click the link in the show notes. I can't wait to hear from you. On this episode of Endurance Minded, I welcome David Amerland. He is a multiple disciplinary author. He explores the evolving relationship between human behavior, technology, personal well-being, and his latest book, Built to Last, is a practical guide to health, longevity, and intentional living. He has a deep background in exercise as well as the business world, and he has combined those things into really a very scientific synthesis of why it is we do what we do. And I was really excited to connect with David, but as we started to talk, I realized that this was going to be an even more impressive and exciting episode than I had originally even imagined, because of the grasp that David has on the emotional connection that we have to movement, why we make decisions, the structures required to move us in particular directions, what keeps us from our full potential. And we talk about a little bit of everything, but the high level topics here are one of the things that David talks about in his book, which is the neurobiology of movement. I have him explain that to me, how our brains are connected to our movement patterns, what it actually looks and feels like from a neurological perspective to make decisions that support the movement patterns that we want, how we process that information, and even the fatigue that the processing of that information creates. We talk about how to design habits and develop a fitness mindset. This is another key piece that he talks about in his book, something that I was really interested to have him unpack, and really just building a mindset that sets you up for longevity, that sets you up for consistency, so that these things that we all know are important, getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise, eating good food that fuels our body. We know that these things on the surface are important. However, so many of us struggle to actually turn the corner and implement these things in our lives in a way that is meaningful, to do them consistently. Another thing that David talks about is what actually creates discipline. And I'll tell you that I was wrong. He asked me what I thought discipline was. I said that I thought that it was to take action in the absence of motivation. And then he actually breaks down the science of why that's not particularly true, and why discipline is actually built in a different way, primarily driven by the structures that we put in place, and that motivation is a neurological response, that we don't take action without motivation, even if it's subconscious. So extremely interesting to hear his definition and then ultimately his understanding of, or his breakdown of discipline, because any of you that have listened to this podcast for a while know that that is something that I talk about a lot. And while the content of that messaging is not untrue, David adds another layer of context there, and another layer of granularity from a scientific perspective that I think is really interesting. So incredible conversation as always, with individuals like David. There's so much opportunity to learn and grow and think differently about how we do the things that we do. And I hope that you'll sit with this one. I hope that you have the opportunity to listen to it from start to finish. There's a lot of really compelling information and content. And I tried to give David the floor as much as possible so that we could highlight his expertise. And again, his book is Built to Last. There'll be a link to that in the show notes. I can't recommend it enough. Really interesting read. David is a veteran in the writer space and a seasoned individual when it comes to publishing books. So this is just another one in his long line of successes, and definitely Built to Last is one to check out. So without further ado, I hope that you enjoy my conversation with David. David, welcome to Endurance Minded. How are you today?
I'm great, almost great, but a slight cough, but I'm sure we're going to be okay. And I'm really thrilled to be here.
Yeah, same. I'm very excited to connect. Lots of overlap in areas of your expertise and things that I'm passionate about. And I think the best place to start, and where I like to kick things off with most of our guests on the show, is just a bit of your story. So I'd love for you to tell us what led you to where you're at today. I know you have a dynamic background in lots of different fields professionally. And lots of interest on the health and wellness side. So just give us that macro overview of what got you to where you're at today. What's the story?
The origin story, right? Okay. Well, like most people, I'm sort of multifaceted. I do a lot of things, especially in my career. I'm a chemical engineer by training. I used my knowledge of mathematics to go into search. I wrote the first book on semantic search back in 2012. Before semantic search was a thing. And because of that, I've consulted with companies across the world, primarily on search, but also on other things like social media, audience targeting, and internal trust and communications. And I've written books on those subjects, marketing and branding and trust and intentionality and decision-making. And in all those different areas, what I'm really driven by is the fact that we as humans tend to behave in really fascinating ways. And if we do something, nothing comes out of nothing. There has to be an origin point. If we think a particular thing, if we do a particular thing, or more importantly, we don't do a particular thing and we should have been doing it, there's always a reason. And that's what actually drives me to sort of peel back the layers. Every book I've written is designed to, for sure it uses technicalities, but it's designed to answer that question. Why do human beings operate in a particular way, in a particular context? And fitness is no different to this. And the journey from something technical to here is that human behavior, the underlying human behavior. But on this particular book and this particular field, it arose out of lots of conversations I had with a close friend as we were training together. And that became the spark for this book. And my own fitness background, I've been training since I was 13 in martial arts. I have 3 different black belts in 3 different martial arts styles. I have a 2nd degree black belt Taekwondo. I'm a certified Taekwondo instructor. And I competed nationally and internationally at a very high level between 1991 and the year 2000.
That's great. Love that. I love the origin, kind of the origin point concept. I think that's really interesting to like you said, that no matter where you're coming from or what specific thing that you're looking at, there's always that origin point. And yeah, I think it's fascinating to, and I want to dive deeper into some of the concepts from your book and other areas of your life. Your book is Built to Last, and we'll talk more specifically about that. But what I know that you found kind of corollary between your background in the business world, and you wrote, like you said, several books on a variety of different topics in that space. But then obviously you've had this very consistent through line for yourself personally with your health and your fitness. So what prompted the shift to shift topics and to shift kind of your I guess research, for lack of a better word. Yeah, I'm just curious what that's because it's a big endeavor to write a book, and you had a long history of doing it in other genres or with other subject matter. What was the impetus that took you in that direction?
Yeah, it was not easy, and fitness was the one area which I never really intended to write a book about. Throughout my life, people would ask me, what should I do to get fit, and I could never really tell them, because what works for me personally wouldn't work for them. Everybody's a little bit different. So when it came to fitness, I had a blind spot, because the way I train and the reason I train and the reason I'm 60 now, right, to contextualize this. And I've been training since 13. And in that 47-year period, there hasn't been a single day when I haven't trained in some way. And for a large part of that, the training was super intense because I was competing. So when you're competing, you have different kind of drives, different kind of operative goals, and they force you to really push the limits of your performance for really personal reasons. So because of that, I had a blind spot. I didn't realize why people can't actually get fit. We have access to information, we have access to places, we have access to equipment, we have access to knowledge, we have government programs everywhere. And through what happened, the pandemic happened, and I couldn't go to the gym. So I had to train at home, and I kitted out my house, one room in my house into a full, fully kitted out gym. And I was training there, and I have a close friend, and he also has a home gym. And we get together and train once a week. And what happens when you train with somebody is, because of the contact, first of all, there's a strong social element, you talk. And secondly, because you're talking, your mind isn't on what you're doing exactly, so you can up the tempo a little bit, and you don't feel that you're going as hard as you would normally were. You're just by yourself, and all you're feeling is the pain of what you're doing. So through those discussions, he brings studies, and we look at sort of certain myths making the rounds, and I'll also bring in the science behind all those things and discuss them in detail. And then it became apparent to me that there were huge gaps in my understanding of what people actually perceived about fitness. And that was what piqued my interest in the first instance. I thought, why is this happening? Why am I so different? Why is my perception so vastly different to a large part of the population? And then as I looked at the facts and the figures, they weren't making sense. We have access, we have government programs, we have the willingness to do things. Globally, we spend almost $1 trillion a year on fitness equipment, on fitness courses, on things which are there to help us get fit. And we are failing at a massive rate. The World Health Organization figures predict that 25 years from now, by 2050, half of all the adult population on the planet is going to be either overweight or obese. It's crazy. And in any developed country, the number of people who exercise more than about 3 times a week, it's only 35% of the population. So something wasn't making sense. And when something doesn't make sense, you go looking for answers. And that's what actually started the whole process. I started looking, and as I was looking, I was finding information, and we discussed it with my friend, and he'd be like, wow, amazed. So, we had this kind of discussion. And that essentially became the basis for the book. So that's why I did it. Yeah.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting, you highlight a really interesting dichotomy, and I think we're all aware of it, but it does put it in stark contrast. Like you said, I mean, for the majority of people, we have the access, right? The barriers are very, very limited for the majority of the population. And yet it is the thing that eludes us, the most, or the thing that people have the hardest time committing to, or finding an approach that is sustainable. And I want to get into some specifics, or I imagine this question might kind of start to lead us in a few different directions. But in your opinion, is there one thing or a few things that create that disconnect between this incredible access and really ultimately a willingness, but then the execution and the commitment is what falls away? What in your opinion is creating that ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. It actually goes to the very heart of the book, what I've actually written about. And here's what happens. We have this amazing body, this brilliant brain. Brain and body, they're a universe in themselves. Okay, we haven't even truly begun to understand their potential and how they operate correctly. And they've developed in tandem through tens of thousands of years. And they're there to help us survive. And to do this, they have basically a single line of function. They have a complexity, which is massive, but it's essentially simple. The brain is a predictive machine to help us survive. It tries with all its might, all its computational power, all its imaginary capacity to visualize things and understand them, to predict the next moment as correctly as possible. And the basis for that is that if you can do that, then we're prepared, we know how to behave, and if we know how to behave, we can safely navigate the next moment. So its job is done. The body also has a simple code, despite its complexity, and it's to adapt. That's all it has to do. And to do that, it kind of reads the environment it is in and adapts to lower its energetic cost of operation. So if you and I were living in the sort of fjords of Norway, we had to climb every day, we had to dig hard for farming, we had to occasionally fight our neighbors because we're in a resource-poor environment, we'll turn out to be Nordic fierce warriors. The Vikings that came over, but they were farmers. There was no Viking training camp which made you into a Viking. These were the survivors of a harsh environment that transformed them into formidable fighters out of necessity. If we lived in the steppes, or if we lived in Africa, near where the running tribes of Ethiopia live, distances along ground is flat. Our vision adapts to see far, because we need to gaze at the horizon, and we become adept at running long distances without tiring. We become runners, essentially. If we live in Mongolia, we become riders, covering long distance on horseback and basically learning to navigate that kind of landscape, terrain. So these are the things which basically transform us. Those things now are in effect in every single person. And in the modern world we live in, they actually hold us back. Or not exactly hold us back, but they lead, because we don't understand them, to dysfunctions. I'll give you one example. Let's say you and I say, okay, let's go to some training. We both train. You train consistently. I do the same thing. Going into some training is not a problem. And yet the moment we discuss it, you feel a slight degree of hesitancy at the back of your mind. You kind of don't want to do it, especially if I haven't trained with you before. and trying to logically explain it. What if it's hard? What if it's better? What if we do something I don't know? And you'll be thinking the same thing. And we haven't discussed in detail any of those things. Okay, that logic which we apply is there to explain the hesitancy we feel. The hesitancy we feel is a mechanism which tries to tell us you're going to engage in a stressor which you don't need because you're not going to get food out of it. And it's going to be energetically expensive, and perhaps you shouldn't do it. So it's a natural hesitancy we all feel. And in a modern environment, how does that actually express itself? You finish the end of your day. You're naturally tired because you expended energy to get through the day. You've dealt with work, read emails, probably have more work, more emails to get through. And now you want to go and train. And you think, oh, it's a tough day. Oh, I'm tired. It was a stressful day. Maybe I should get some sleep. Or maybe I should do some extra work and get some more emails done. These are logical things which have a valid basis in your reality and my reality. At the same time, they're not necessary. We can put them off until tomorrow. We can say the working day finished, let's go and exercise. But because we don't see that exercise is something which is necessary for us to do in terms of what we're going to get out of it, i.e. food or survival, we tend to have this hesitance inside our head, which tells us, oh, don't do it, and we listen to it. So that's just one example of how modern life trips us up. And it does so because that ancient mechanism is in effect. If we understand the operating system that's at work, however, then we're in a better position to actually think, okay, I feel that, I know where it's coming from, I'm now going to work around it, and this is how I'm going to do it. You can try your own personal strategy of 2 or 3 things you'd have sort of prepared to allow you to go and train when your brain tells you, maybe you shouldn't, because it's a stressor.
That's fascinating. So what is it that the next thing that leads me to think about is then what is the strategy, or what enables some people, and you just touched on it, kind of developing your own strategies, but what is the thing that makes some people able to override that and to make that path forward so clear? Right. And you mentioned it, and, for yourself and me, and, people where fitness and movement and training is just so ingrained in our, it doesn't matter if you're right. It seems like such an easy step to move from not feeling like it to engaging in training, right? Because you can see the outcome on the other side, the benefit you're going to get, how you're going to feel, but that's such a big barrier for most people. So what is then the next thing, right? That what separates those two camps, people that can do it and people that really struggle with it. I'm not going to say people that can't do it, because I know that it is within us to build that bridge, but in your opinion and experience, what separates those two individuals?
You answered your own question.
Okay. Yeah. Say it back to me so I can hear it.
You said that you and I will go and train because we have tied into who we are the benefits we're going to get at the other end. Now, in our head, in every person's head, there's a calculus running, which whether we're aware of it or not doesn't matter. It's there. And this calculus basically looks at what we propose to do, the perceived energetic cost of that activity, and that's going to change depending on how tired we are. At the beginning of the day, you might be more willing. At the end of the day, you're going to be a lot less willing to do something. And it's going to balance that perceived cost with the expected outcome and its emotional benefit to us. So if we take any person off the street, it doesn't matter who they are, and we start explain to them they need to eat better, sleep better, and exercise more, they're going to agree 110%. No question about that. It's logical. Not only that, but they'll tell you they want that. But the difference between that abstract agreement we're going to get and what you and I have is that emotional connection. When I train, I'm able to overcome that hesitancy in my head, because I know that if I don't, I'm 60 now, I'm aging, I don't want to lose that physicality which I have. And when I was training in the past, I had an equally strong emotional connection to a different goal. That changes as you go through life and get older. But the emotional connection has always been there. And that has always allowed my brain to recalculate the effort involved and take as an acceptable price for what I was going to get. And that's what you have. That's what I have. 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the goal that you're trying to get will have changed. But the process, that calculation will still be in place. And as long as the emotional connection is strong, you'll always be able to do it. And that's the difference. When do people really try hard to exercise, lose weight, sleep better? When they have a health scare, when they see a relative go through something really painful because they didn't exercise that self-care that they should. And that's the wake-up call. That's what changes that emotionality in them, which allows them to recalculate the cost of that equation.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense when you say it, like you said. I mean, that so often is that primary driver, right? It's the health scare. It's the experience with their children where they couldn't keep up or couldn't play with their kids the way they wanted to, or those scenarios that do happen to so many people, that then with that extreme emotional connection that then breaks down that barrier enough to take action, right? I always describe and I'm sure you're aware of this, right? With any kind of action in life, we don't take action until the pain required to take that action is less than the friction needed to do it, right? There's this kind of tipping point where you're like, well, now it doesn't feel quite as painful because the pain of not doing it is now less than the pain or friction required to actually take the action. And until that equilibrium is in a certain place, or that seesaw tips, no one ever takes action, right? For a number of things in our lives. It's just like,
it's beautifully described what you said, that friction element. It's a constant in every walk of life. You're talking about businesses, and when they actually change and transform, they do so only, really, truly, they begin to lose market share and the bottom line is hurt.
mm-hmm.
Talk about people, they undergo those changes exactly when they have a health scare, or they see that kind of problem with their family or family member or themselves personally because they can't keep up with their kids. Mm-hmm. Which also begs the question, right? I've been training since 13, so I didn't have the health scare, I didn't have a relative die on me. And, there are also other people who are athletes who are driven to do these things. You really put your body through incredible trials, pushing the limits of what you can do, trying to find the edge in your performance, and you could ask why. And for most of the people in that situation, myself included, that's a coping mechanism. There are other things you're trying to work out inside you, and you're channeling that into that kind of activity. And there are studies on this. Athletes perceptually report lower pain from intense exercise than the average population. Same calculus, same body, same neural connections. And you could argue that they're more self-aware of their body. So you have to ask, why do they perceptually report less pain? Because that recalculation is gone in their head. They're here, they want to get there, they don't feel good in where they are. They know it's going to be better where they will get to in terms of the results they get. The process appears acceptable, so they're willing to undergo it. It doesn't matter how tough it is. And if you look at top performers, look at Usain Bolt, fastest man in the world. He had scoliosis of the spine, which is a curvature of the spine. One leg is slightly shorter than the other. He started training to overcome those deficiencies. Look at Mike Tyson, who's the youngest heavyweight boxer in the world. And he was, at 15, trouble with the law, about to go to prison. So these are things which drive us to find out a better us, a deeper us. And there's a lot of pain involved, a lot of emotional discontent that we're actually fighting through, and we channel that into physical activity. So that's that segment of the population.
Yeah. No, I mean, that certainly rings true, for myself. I mean, I've had that experience where, like you said, that consistent connection to exercise is is certainly a mechanism to process and cope other things. I didn't have that scare, much like yourself. I've been engaged in training since I was 11 or 12, or as soon as I could get into some sports and stay consistent, that's been it. But it's certainly as I've aged and done other things, and the trials and tribulations of life, that's been an outlet that's allowed me to engage and kind of process that information. And yeah, that's really interesting, that the kind of pain threshold is as well. I could certainly see that, having been someone who's pushed myself too far and hurt myself and didn't even realize it at the time. I could see, not saying that anyone should do that, but yeah, I could certainly see how that plays out.
They certainly shouldn't. I was going to add, because you said about pain. No, pain is a mysterious thing, because we all have pain receptors. Or rather, we have receptors in the brain which receives certain signals. And the brain then interprets those signals as pain. But the interpretation is entirely subjective. There's no objective measure of pain. So for you and I, you said you hurt yourself and you just discounted it. It sounds crazy, but it isn't, because your brain is in such a state that what you were working through, the cost of doing it had been dampened down and filtered by your brain, so you barely felt it. There are reports of boxers at heavyweight division powering through with broken hands, broken wrists, and going through 12 rounds of punching. And you think, how is that possible even? Well, there you have it. It's that kind of thing. Sure, they feel the pain, but it's an ego as opposed to blinding pain. And the average person gets a thorn in their finger and they can't operate. They need to take it out.
Yeah. That's really, that's fascinating. I want to talk about one specific area in your book that you talk about, because we're talking about the kind of mental, emotional aspects of exercise and of the commitment to exercise and training. And one of the topics that you cover in your book is the neurobiology of movement. And I thought that was a really interesting one, just kind of the phraseology of that. I haven't heard those particular words put together in that way, if that makes sense. And that really struck me. And I'd love for you just to explain, let's start with just kind of what that means, and maybe we can expand on that, because I think that's a really, again, it really struck me as a very interesting. I'm so, as we're uncovering here, I'm very fascinated by that connection between mind and body, and why it is we do certain things. And so, yeah, can you just unpack that for us a bit, that neurobiology of movement?
Absolutely. Now, there's absolutely zero movement that the body can engage in that the brain isn't active at as well. And here there are many different layers of how the brain is engaged in the body. First of all, we start with the absolute basic structure. The brain runs its own network of communications throughout the body. The two are inseparable. Everything we do, the movement of my hands, the batting of my eyelids, talking, the mechanics of actual speech are governed by conscious and subconscious signals, which the brain sends out to the body. And if we look at an opera singer, for example, and their ability to control their voice box and their lip shapes at a muscular level, both conscious decisions, when the rest of the things are subconscious, then they basically get really good kind of communication. Okay, so basically that's a very basic kind of connection between brain and body. But then we go into more complex movements where the brain has to help the body move through three-dimensional space with tremendous accuracy. The easiest description I can give here is if you have a pendant which you put around your neck and it has a clasp, you take your hands, go like this, and click, you do it. And you think, okay, how is that possible? You don't have eyes at the back of your head. So how could you see how to do that? And the first time you do it, you struggle. And you struggle a little bit the second time. And the third time becomes easier. And the fourth time it's a lot easier. And the fifth time you can do it with your eyes shut in a darkened room. You don't actually need to see. And what happens at that level is that the brain has formulated such a detailed 3D image of how the body moves in that space to perform that particular kind of exercise, that when your hands and your arms are at that particular angle, signals which we don't consciously process go to the brain and tell it that's where it is, and it clicks it. So that's a second level. And the third level is when we involve ourselves into very complex movements in 3D space, like perhaps sparring in a sort of a martial arts situation, a boxing situation, any kind of contact sport, any kind of team sport, we have a lot of elements moving around, any kind of complex game where, you, even if it's one-on-one, like tennis, for example, the terrain is 3D, everything's moving very quickly. Then there's a strong predictive element to this. You're not actually chasing the events as they happen. You're processing them at tremendous speed and actually positioning yourself ahead of them in order to predict them. The easiest example here is baseball. The bowler sends out a ball at such speed that visually, consciously, we can't see it. When the batter hits it, it's actually correctly predicted based on the initial throw of the fastball, where it's going to be in the future when he swings his bat. How do we do that? We consciously don't know, but that's the skill. That's what we then go ahead and call talent, which is the result of the accuracy of those connections in our brain. Some people have a predisposition to better wiring for many different reasons, which makes them more talented in that particular sphere. So you get a great batter, for instance, they have that understanding. They see the movement, they analyze it, they can swing faster, meet the ball where it's going to be. So.
Wow. Yeah. I've never actually thought about that. The discipline that comes to mind for me that I've spent a lot of time doing is trail running. Right. And there's these, when you're high in the mountains and there's all this dynamic terrain and you have to forecast ahead and you don't think about that consciously, like you said, but you're running down a mountain and you're, trying to control your momentum and all these things. And there's roots and rocks and trees and turns and, and you find too that at the end of a long day like that, you're mentally very tired. You've been processing lots of information, kind of unconsciously. That was something that always struck me when I go out and do big days in the mountains is, your body might be fatigued, but mentally it feels like you've been taking a test all day, or something you've been studying. There's this kind of low grade, not a headache, but just this low grade kind of mental fatigue.
It's a depletion, isn't it? It's a depletion of energy. And here's how accurate your description is on this. There are two elements when you go trail running, because you're not running on an even surface. So visually, you're taking information, you're adjusting because you've done it so many times before. Subconsciously, you're adjusting for the impact of your foot on uneven ground. So it doesn't feel jarring, it doesn't trip you up, it doesn't slow you down, it speeds you up when you want it to, and you can basically maintain the pace you want when the incline is different. And this is done subconsciously. You don't have to think about it. If I haven't done trail running for a long time, if I were to come out with you, all that work for me now would have to be conscious. So now I've got that load. And for you, consciously, you're also strategizing. You're determining where you're going to pick up your pace, where do you need to let the incline take you, where do you need to watch your footing, all those things which are associated with that. So at the end of the day, there's a strong mental component to that. And it's the same at any high-level performance. You take a tennis match, same thing. You take a boxing match. Boxers essentially, beyond the physicality of the impact of their sport, they have to take apart the strategy of the other person, remodel their own strategy, which they've trained for, but now they may have to adjust for, find the weaknesses, and insert what they've discovered as solutions into that equation. It's a hugely mental game. And on top of that, you get hit. And on top of that, you get tired because it's massively exhausting. And you have to deal with the discomfort of exhaustion with the discomfort of pain, anxiety, uncertainty, and still operate at a high mental level in order to make the physical level which you have achieved work for you. It's magic when it happens.
Is there any link between that and what we were talking about earlier, that just that the what that kind of spark to move is, or that disconnect between knowing that it's valuable, knowing that you need to exercise, you need to do these things, take these actions, but then struggling to actually take the action? Is there, does this neurobiology of movement, does it play into that scenario at all, or is it only once we've started the action or engaged in the discipline that this neurobiology, or do we predict the kind of impending fatigue and stress and focus required, and then that might cause us to take some action for or against, or is there no link there at all?
I'd say it depends, and because they're not, this is a very difficult part to study, so we have to rely on observational and reported data. It's going to be different for everybody because your reasons for doing it are different. If we look at somebody like David Goggins, for instance, when he does these ultra-marathon runs and he hates running, and he says that for the first 72 miles, he hates it. He hates himself for doing it. He just does not want to be there. And then he says for the moment he hits about 72 miles, he has all the answers he needs to the questions for why he's doing what he does. So that's the focus which allows him to do it. I suspect it's the same for boxers. Everybody's doing it for their own reasons. But while you're doing it in the ring, the answers you seek and the way you seek them would make sense for you. And they can often determine the outcome of what you're doing. I remember, and I can't remember his name, I can't remember, was it Bellew? And I can't remember his first name. He was a heavyweight boxer in England. He was at the top of his profession. And when he won his title against his opponent, he had had really bad night's sleep because his dad had died 2 days before. He hadn't eaten properly. He was really stressed out. So on paper, he's in the worst possible condition to actually go out in the ring. And he produced an amazing fight. How did he do that? The way he synthesized all those bad elements in his head on the pressure that he felt on the ring that day and allowed him to find some kind of answer that made sense to him, transformed his performance, and he won. So, when he was explaining it like a few days afterwards, he was saying, he had this and he had that and he hadn't trained properly because his dad was dying. You think, how did you win? But later on, when I was looking at studies of how our belief system and the way we interpret what's happening to us allows the brain to allocate resources differently and also experience the reporting of the body differently, well, then it made perfect sense.
That's interesting. I've long said, I'd like you to tell me if this is appropriate or not. I've long said that the mind decides if we're successful long before the body does, right? And what I mean by that, in the context that I've used that in, is from an athletic perspective, we often, get in our head about a particular, could be just a training session, right? I'm tired. I don't feel good. I didn't eat right. Maybe I'm dehydrated. I'm probably not going to feel good. My legs are heavy. The list goes on. And we decide ahead of time how that training, that bout of training is going to go. And then lo and behold, what happens? It kind of goes the way that we think it's going to go. I am an advocate of really trying to put yourself in a mental place where you show up open-minded and allow your body to lead the way. And in my case, and lots of people that I've worked with over the years, more often than not, it turns out much better than you thought it was going to. And even on some of those days that are least likely, like for instance, your scenario, with the boxer, you can have breakthrough performances on the least likely of days. You could feel the best that you felt. You could have your best pace or your best strength training session. You could set a PR. So is there validity to that? Is that good advice? I've been saying it a long time, so tell me if it's not, because I need to stop saying it.
No, keep on saying it. I will bring in a study carried out by Harvard University in 2005. They were looking to understand a similar thing. What they did is they took 60 hotel maids, they're the people who are responsible for sort of turning out a room so it's ready for the next guest after a guest has been there. And there were 20 hotel maids from 3 different hotels, and they were doing pretty much identical work. So they took all the biomarkers to look at their weight and their blood pressure and their waist to heat ratio and their body fat and their muscle mass, all those things. And then they took 40 of them aside and they gave them a detailed presentation explaining in a lot of detail how essentially the work that they were doing every single day was a kind of exercise that would help them get fitter. And then they took the 20 hotel maids who were part of the control group and they told them, we're just interested to understand what kind of work you guys do. And they let them do their work for about 12 weeks, which is 3 months. And at the end of the 3-month period, they brought them back in and they carried out all the biomarker measurements. And this is what they found. The 40 hotel maids that had been told that what they were doing was exercise had improved between 12 and 15% on every single biomarker. The blood pressure was lower, cholesterol levels lower, their BMI was lower, their muscle mass was up, their fat content was down, their waist to heat ratio had improved, and the control group had shown no difference whatsoever. They're all doing the same work. And you think, okay, what's the difference here? The difference is that perceptual ability. It's how the brain synthesizes part of our reality. How does it do that? It does it by preparing the body for action. If you're getting ready to go on a trail run, what do? You have a process and then you put your gear together, you're doing it in your head, and if you're doing it competitively, even more so, and you're starting to go through it in your head, by the time you get there, you're almost warmed up. Your body's raring to go. Your muscles are the muscles you're going to use are already more oxygenated than the rest of your body. Your heart rate is just a little bit better. Your body temperature is a little bit better. And somebody who doesn't do that, or who does the thinking, oh, this is my worst day possible, they're turning out and their heart rate is not right, their body temperature is not right, their muscles are cold and stiff. It's going to take them at least 20, 30 minutes to warm up, to get to operating speed. And by then they're thinking, this is too hard, I can't do it. So negativity, piles of negativity. And all that is doing is it basically hampers a little bit the body's energy pathways. So energy availability is not as easy. And anything that is not as easy, even if it's marginally difficult, on a long run, makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. That makes me feel better. I wasn't giving out bad advice. It's been something that's been so glaring in my own athletic journey, is that the body follows the mind. There's been so many instances where I've convinced myself that it wasn't going to be a good day. And lo and behold, I got to be right about that. It wasn't a good day. Yeah. And your body doesn't feel good and everything's harder. And and then those days where you just can show up and you get your mind in the right place, lo and behold, your body is more prepared for that. You feel better. And I see so many athletes trying to balance the stressors of life, which are inevitable and perfectly reasonable, but they let those things predetermine their potential, right? How they think they'll feel, even forecast it out, right? This is going to be a really challenging month. On the work front, I bet my training will suffer. Well, you've already made up your mind, right? Or it's going to be really hot. I bet I'll have a really hard day. Well, yeah, I bet you will if you've already decided. Not that you shouldn't take some some steps to prepare. Obviously, preparation is key, but I have just found it time and time again where as soon as you kind of put that out there and you plant that seed in your mind, your body will follow suit. You've almost kind of already put the nail in the coffin, so to speak. And
absolutely, it happens every time. And what you say is so true. And you work a lot on empirical evidence, and you draw your own conclusions from that, and they're so accurate. This is what happens. The things we can't control, because you can have a bad day for things you can't control. If you reframe them, the day changes, your ability changes, and this is why it happens. A lot of the times we experience stress we are not aware of. So we can have stress, and I can say, how's it going? I'm going to say, okay. But if I was to take your biomarkers, your blood pressure will be up, your heart rate will be elevated, cortisol levels in your bloodstream will be up because you're not having a good day. You don't feel 100%, and everything is going wrong, and it keeps on going wrong. If you allow that to, even subconsciously, to run you, then you become stressed. And when you become stressed by something which is abstract, the brain doesn't actually have a way of differentiating from a potential threat that is real. The reaction is going to be the same. This is the ancient mechanism that was designed to protect us kicking in now, right? Because this is what happens. Your brain checks to see that your body is under stress. It sees that the signs are identical to threat detection. It prepares you for action, the traditional fight or flight response, except there's no fight and no flight. And in order to do that better, it shuts down the higher analytical cognitive centers of your brain that you need for critical thinking because they are energetically expensive. Only understanding that if you're going to fight or flight, you don't need those. You need everything else. But this is the ones you actually need. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at the problem, you're feeling stressed about it, or you're looking at a situation or a day, you're feeling stressed about it, and it only becomes harder to navigate because you can't see your way around it. Because you haven't got the skill, you haven't got the access to the computing power you need in order to actually be better in that part of your day. And if you're just able to reframe it and decompress, which is what you say, you think, okay, I'm going to do whatever it is, however it goes, I'll just take what I get because I know that I can't do any better. So you take the pressure off you. Then the cortisol levels in the bloodstream drop. The stress response in your body somewhat gets better. And you have access to analytical thinking, which allows you to navigate it better.
That makes total sense. Yeah. It leads me to think about another area. One of the things that you speak about is how, just thinking about how we set ourselves up for success, and the mindset piece is critical, as we've discussed, but there's also the habits component of how we set our, so how do we even make it to this run, for instance, that we're stressed about, right? This only matters if we've built a life and designed habits that support us, prioritizing this. And one of the things that you talk about is designing habits that develop a fitness mindset. And I'd love for you to expand on that. The building of habits, the creation of discipline, something I'm very, very interested in, and I know that it shows up very, very differently for different people. When I'm someone who is extremely disciplined, arguably from others to a fault sometimes, and very, very habit oriented, very routine. But I can describe that to another person, and the seemingly a bridge too far, right? That's not the way their mind works. They have a hard time doing that. So I respect that. But I'd love to hear that from your perspective. Just how do we design habits and develop that fitness mindset?
Okay. I'll ask you a question first. When you say you're disciplined, what do you mean by that?
It's a great question. And I'm curious to get your definition or opinion on this. For me, discipline is action in absence of motivation. So I
Neuroscientifically, we there's no if there's no motivation, and then motivation is a neurochemical component,
uh-huh.
then there's no action because we're disinclined to take it. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Every time we take any kind of action, we are motivated to do it. There's no halfway because neurons fire or don't fire. And when do they fire from a neurochemical perspective? Motivation is essentially the accumulation of specific neurotransmitters in particular parts of the brain, which create a negative charge and positive charge ions. And when they reach a particular threshold, there's discomfort involved and they fire. When they fire, then they basically stabilize down to a low energetic level and we feel relief. Okay, so if you were to be in a desert, for instance, without water and I place a glass of water in front of you and I tell you not to touch it, well, it's within grabbing distance. You can only hold it for so long and then you're going to reach for it. There's no halfway. And the moment you reach and drink, instant relief, right? So you've been highly motivated to drink it. Whenever we do something, we're motivated to do it, whether we understand that motivation or not. That's immaterial. We add the extra fudge of willpower and discipline on top of that. And they're semantics, really, because this is what willpower is. It's the process that allows you to see how to do what you want to do. If the process is there, you will do it. That's the willpower to do it. If I have the glass in front of you, well, there you go. You're going to reach for it because there's the process. You're willing to do it. And what is discipline? Discipline is structure which we put in place to allow us to repeat a process again and again. So that's our discipline. So you said you're habit orientated and you have certain routines. And that is your process and your structure. You have a highly structured life. And you're very process driven because you put the steps together to allow you to do something. And when you try to explain this to somebody else who hasn't got that habit, it appears really difficult. So it's like you're asking them, let's say when it comes in the context of exercise, you're asking them to do something hard. You're asking them to willingly go and experience a physical stressor again and again and again. And you're not giving them a process of how to do it on a daily basis. You're telling them you just have to do it. And they haven't put a process in place. So their life now, which is complex from their perspective and difficult, is going to include this stressor, which they don't know how to access easily. And there's no structure around them to allow them to access it every day. If you tell them, you just got to do it 7 days a week and give them no support, allow them, maybe they're living in a household where nobody exercises. Maybe they're dealing with a job where they have no time to exercise. All these things, right? No structure around them. So they can't do it. And we say, well, you have any discipline. No, you don't have any structure. So when it comes now to somebody who's new to this is what I always say. You do the easiest thing first because it's going to be a stressor. So what kind of exercise can you do that you can do easily? Is it walking around the block because you have access to it? Is it going to your local gym because it's near? Let's go for that. Is it going on a bike? You got a stationary bike? Whatever it is, we find that. And that's your in. And it doesn't matter how long you do it for, as long as you do it. And in order for you to do it, what do you need? Do you need 5 minutes a day, an hour a day? How do you find that time? This is the process you put in place. That ensures willpower. Because they want to do it. Their motivation is there. So if we give them the process, now their willpower to do it is a lot stronger. If you say, well, you know what? For that particular part of the day, nobody bothers you. Or for that particular part of the day, I'll come in and do it with you. Or whatever structure we'll put in place to help them do it consistently. Well, that's the discipline. In over 6 months, everything has changed. Over 3 months, things have changed. Why? Because they are different. Their brain is different, their body is different, their understanding of the process is different, their understanding of the structure is different. They're different people, literally, inside and out.
I love that. Yeah, thanks for that explanation. That's a level of granularity that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think, we're talking about it kind of specifically through the lens of training or athleticism, but certainly any area of life, right? The thing that we have trouble implementing or putting in place, whether that's eating in a way that supports our habits, whether that's sleeping, whether that's it's the process, right? We have to build that structure to set ourselves up for success, and that makes a lot of sense. And now that just thinking about it personally, that's something that I spend a lot of time working on. If I want to prioritize sleep, well, then I back into what my day needs to look like to do that, so that I'm not up late, or I'm not on my phone at night, or I can stop work, all these systems. And I'm not saying, I'm using myself as an example. Of course, I'm I don't always get it right, like everyone, but that's that's extremely interesting. So then I know there's a layer two in that, where you speak about, or one of the things you talk about is routines building resilience. And so now we are talking about routines and habits and structures. And so to what extent does that build resilience, and why is that an important trait that we should try to accomplish or reach?
Well, resilience, neuroscientifically, is the ability to withstand unexpected external stresses we don't control, so that they don't send us into survival mode and robust or analytical thinking, and internally unbalance the homeostasis of our internal system. So that's what the resilience is. And it's funny. It says, how do you build that? What do you have to do? Well, obviously, one of the things you can do is subject yourself to some stresses, because that creates, it's like lifting heavy, right? If you lift heavy, you get stronger. Why do you get stronger? Because you're lifting heavy, and you adapt for that. So you get to a lighter weight and it feels lighter. Or you get to a weight as heavy as the one you were lifting, and you can do it. It doesn't stress you out. So that's an easy example. But let's actually examine this in a different perspective. This is how routine and process and structure, all those things, build resilience. They allow us to lower the energetic cost of living from day to day. So let's say, you have all this energy which you have to expend by the end of the day, and it takes up all of your energy to get through that day. So you have nothing left. And I come in and I throw the proverbial spanner by, creating a crisis for you. You're going to overflow, because you have no margin to deal with the extra crisis. It takes all the available energy you have to get through that day. But if you created a routine for you, you know what you're going to eat, you plan your work, you know where you're going to go. All those things are almost automatic. You don't have to think hard about them. You've created in a way that's easy for you to do. Now you can finish your day and you have gas in the tank. So if I come and throw in a spanner, a crisis your way, well, you have the energy to deal with that. It's not going to shock you to the degree that you're going to go into survival mode. You're going to feel intense stress, intense anxiety, your brain shutting down, things becoming bleak, simply because this happened. You'll think, okay, unfortunate, and it happened, it's a problem, let's deal with it. Same problem, but you have the capacity to deal with it. That's resilience. That's how we build it up, by having a slightly better planned life. And I'm not an advocate for a rigid planning in our life. That's crazy, right? We're not robots. But by working smart and finding ways to save energy so that living itself becomes easier, then we can deal with the crises that occur, which we can't plan for, and they are always unforeseen.
It's a great explanation. That really resonates. I think, that for me is what I've found, the real value that I've found in having those routines, is it actually frees up a tremendous amount of space and energy elsewhere in my life. While it might seem like it would be more constricting, by having these systems in place, I'm actually able to deploy energy in lots of other areas, be it exercise, for my family, for free time, because I've I'm not, I'm not scrambling, I'm not always putting out fires. There's a control and a routine there. So that makes a lot of sense. That's a very clear explanation of just, for me, what feels like just a lived experience of like, why I default to, and why so many people that recognize the value in that default to it as well. And I think it almost becomes a kind of force of habit as well as you get busier, as there's more demands on your time and your energy. You don't have the luxury to be tired. You can't get to 2:00 in the afternoon and be done with energy. You have a lot more that's required. And so I think just in working with high performers and being, that seems to almost just be kind of the necessary default, is you have to, even if it's not your strength, you have to build in those systems because you don't have the luxury of all this, inordinate wasted time. So that's very interesting. What, this has been an incredible conversation, and it's fascinating to understand and get more insight into the science of why these different things exist, be it the motivator to get us off the couch, so to speak, the proverbial, fire that we light under us to have us take action or to build routines and habits. What would be one piece of advice that you would give to people to help them, if we'll draw from your book, help them, be more built to last, be someone who is able to take this mindset of fitness and develop these habits? What's, if people walk away with one thing from our conversation, what's one piece of advice or guidance that you'd want them to have?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. Thank you for asking that. We all initially make the same mistake. We try to do too much too soon. We try to fix everything because we are, as people, intensely aware of our own deficiencies. And the moment we make the decision to fix them, we want them all fixed as quickly as possible. And that's too hard. It's impossible to do for anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. So it has to be an incremental process, starting with what's easiest to change. You're going to change one thing only, and you're going to change it marginally so that it's possible to improve consistently day after day. Maybe if you've never exercised, instead of saying, I'm going to start exercising 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, why don't you just go for a walk, 10-minute walk every day? And then when that works out and it's easy, you up it to 15, go to 20. But do it gradually, so it doesn't feel like a massive load. And if you apply that principle to everything in terms of improvement, then that constant incremental improvement changes you for the better in the long term, and you haven't even felt the pressure.
Man, no greater advice. Yeah, I mean, I that's been the piece that I've seen derail so many people, is trying to, once they make the decision, trying to do it all to make that wholesale change overnight. So fantastic advice and very, very valuable. So I hope that everyone listening, if you're in that boat, and to be clear, in any area of your life, even if you're someone who exercises consistently, if that's not the area of friction, I think we all have an area in our life that we would like to change or to optimize or to see some improvements in. And your advice is valid in any area of life, right? Start with what's easiest, make that small change, and then build into it once those things feel slightly less friction filled. So, David, this has been incredible. I can't thank you enough for your time. You're a wealth of information, and it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It was brilliant. Thank you so much for the questions. I absolutely loved it. I didn't even realize by the time went.
Yeah, same. Thanks, David. We appreciate you.